Welcome back to TinyBlueGames. My name is, of course, Seesaw or Chris, and today we're talking about MMOs in 2021. Specifically, we're talking about the future of MMORPGs and what a lot of the community, and myself included, see as kind of two rays of hope in the future for the genre. And the two games I'm talking about are, of course, New World and Ashes of Creation. Now, you're probably someone, like if you've been in the MMO market and you're watching these kind of videos, you probably have your own opinion about both of these games. And some people hate one of the games, some people hate both of the games, some people love both of the games. There's a lot of mixed opinions about it. I've really wanted to talk more about them on the channel, but I've kind of been doing myself a favor by keeping my distance and not getting overhyped for either of the two games until we get closer to releases and have more information about how they're actually going to play. Because many a times in the past, I've gotten really excited about a new title, only to find out it's gonna be many years before it comes out, and then it becomes really difficult to enjoy the current MMOs that you're playing, because in your mind, you think that this new game that's going to come out is going to just completely outshine all these other games, and it's just really hard to take them seriously or to invest time into them, knowing that there's this great thing coming around the corner. And then you just spend your waking days watching videos and speculative discussions about what the game could do when no one really knows until it actually launches. Anyways, that's what I've been trying to protect myself from, but this is my one slip up, I guess. I'm making a video talking about the two of them, sharing my thoughts on why I think both of them are exciting and why I'm still hesitant about both of them, because I don't think either of them's a clear win. And I know a lot of people have different opinions on which one's going to succeed, if even we can compare them, because they're also games that I think are designed for very different player bases. Now, that's becoming less clear as time's gone on, and we'll get into that in just a second. But I do think there is a pretty big distinction between the type of player that will like Ashes of Creation and the type of player that will like New World. Now, in the background, you'll be seeing some footage of me playing New World. I actually did play the game during the test period way back when. It's like a year ago, so do keep in mind that that's pretty dated footage, but it's actual footage of me playing the game, which is pretty exciting, whereas the Ashes of Creation footage that you're going to see is just some general videos and stuff like that. I did have some gameplay of the Battle Royale they did, but it's not really super representative of what I think the game is going to be necessarily, so I haven't even put that into the video because it's just very different. So I've stuck more to the footage they've been releasing of the gameplay, but once again, that's footage created by developers to make the game look good. And that no matter how much you trust a company, if a company is showing you a certain view, it's going to be what they want you to see. They're not going to go and look at the bad stuff and put that in their videos. So keep that in the back of your mind, and that's not, like I say, not pointing out any problems of either company. I think both companies are trying to deliver the best product possible, and I'm excited to ultimately see and play both the products when they do hit the market. But yeah, let's dive into my thoughts on each game. So the first game I want to talk about is Ashes of Creation, and that's because it's probably the one that I think most people are more excited about, but it is the one that's coming out kind of on the longer timeline. It's still a fair ways out. Some people are going to get to play it with the alphas and stuff like that. I'm definitely going to wait until it's much more close to release before I dive in, even if I might even wait all the way till an official release. I'm not entirely sure on that. But yeah, I'm going to wait and see how it plays out, but it's been really cool to see a lot of the content that is coming out on their YouTube. I think they've done exceptionally well at communicating their goals, communicating and showing the development as it progresses, which is, I think, a really hard thing to do for a lot of these MMO companies that kind of spring up out of nowhere, is that they have this big idea and they say they're going to do all these things, and then time goes on and they show no real progress towards doing that. I think Ashes of Creation have done an exceptional job, and because of that, they've actually gotten a lot of streamers, a lot of YouTubers and stuff like that on board and discussing the game, which is exactly what the game needs to get off the ground. Now, in terms of the actual game itself, I think it is probably, of the two of them, the one that has the biggest chance of becoming one of the top MMOs out there on the market. It'll be a very long battle to get up into the numbers of some of the bigger games like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, RuneScape, or old school RuneScape, ESO, and those kind of things. But I think it has the potential to get there. I think it is the one that is most likely to compete directly with World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, as it does have a lot of similar systems and then a lot of additional systems on top of that. And that is the biggest thing I get when I start reading or watching videos about the game, is that it's got so many systems that they're trying to make work. And if they pull it off, it could be the most complex, interesting world ever created in an MMO. And I think that's why everyone's super excited, is there is a huge amount of potential there. However, it's for that exact reason that I'm probably more skeptical of this game actually being as successful as it looks on paper. And that's not to say that I hope it fails or anything like that. I think this game, people need to manage their expectations more because they are promising more. For instance, you can look at the class system and look at all the different combinations of classes you can play. And on paper, that sounds like such a cool thing for an MMO, to have all that customization, to have all those different classes and different ways to make your character. It's something that everyone loves. And you think back to MMOs like Rift and stuff like that have tried to play around with that. And it's one of the most amazing features in those games. However, if not done completely properly, you end up with just a few class combinations that end up being absolutely played, and a bunch that are not played at all, or buggy, or this or that, or don't even work. There's a lot to balance and a lot to actually make work for those systems to come through. That being said, I do think it's worth, having the big vision, especially if you are playing the long game. And I think that's the other good thing, is that Ashes came out, they had this big timeline, they've been very ready to extend deadlines when necessary, been very transparent about why things get extended and stuff like that. And I think it's proven to the community that they want to stick the course. They want this really hard to achieve but amazing end goal, and they're willing to put the time and effort to get there. And as a player, I think that's the absolute right thing for them to do. It's difficult for us because we want to get into the game and experience it, but it's definitely what needs to be done when it is this big system and complex worlds and stuff like that. So I think ultimately Ashes of Creation has more power to get to the top of the MMO market. I think a lot of the systems and like traditional high fantasy feeling definitely plays to the interests that the majority of MMO players have. I think it's going to be a lot easier transition for someone coming from World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV or any of those bigger games to go into Ashes of Creation versus New World, or at least what New World used to consider itself, because that's been changing a lot over the last, I'd say, few months, and we're going to dive into that in just a second. The final thing I wanted to mention about Ashes of Creation, and there's tons of systems I could go talking about, but is the impactfulness of the world and social interactions, because I think they've really tried to capture the social interactions in this game. From all of the developer updates, you talk with the developers or hear them answering questions and stuff like that. It seems like the way players interact with other players is the core kind of guiding principles behind a lot of their designs when it comes to PvP, when it comes to how players interact for PvE, when it comes to economies and political systems, and even the way their world with the nodes and node systems work. It has to do with players interacting with players. And I think a lot of us in the MMO market can agree that one of the big shifts that has happened over the last 10 years has been kind of a streamlined effect in a lot of these bigger MMOs, where you don't necessarily need to interact with players the same way you used to. It's become a lot more of this hub sort of stuff where you get together with a random set of players for this one 30-minute instance, and then you never have to think about them again. Yes, there's a lot of systems to make friends still, to join guilds, but I'd say overall this has been something that's been less and less present in a lot of these games. Specifically for myself, when I think back to my old times in MapleStory, where I would literally just hang out in the free market talking to people that I had made friends with for no other reason, just to hang out, because I thought it was cool to hang out with people online. And there's something to be said for the novelty of interacting in these MMO worlds online just going away as it's become more normal and more games have been able to do this. But I think there is something to do with the game design and the way the systems work that do promote that interaction as well. So I'm very interested to see if these systems do actually encourage people to play together, encourage people to play against each other, because that is a core thing as well. Games need to encourage the hatred, the horde versus alliance, the rivalry, the actual, I'm super angry they just did that, so I'm gonna like grind this out and make them pay next time kind of scenario, because both the good and the bad side of the interactions drive content. And that's what it really comes down to. If you develop the systems that allow people to replay the same instance, the same world, and just have a different experience because of the interactions, that is what an MMO can do above all other games. So if New World, if Ashes of Creation capture that, and they are able to do the next version of that, I think that's what's going to allow them to really capture the MMO market. So it's going to be exciting to see if those systems do play out for Ashes of Creation. I think they have more systems that could allow for this, and that's why I say there's more chance of it becoming one of the top MMOs if executed perfectly. And that's kind of the end line for Ashes of Creation. Extremely ambitious, hard to pull off, but if they do it, it could be magic, and I think that's why so many people are excited about it. But now let's turn to New World and see what they're up to. Now, New World's a bit of a different situation, where the game originally was pitched as something very different than what it is now, and I think that's one of the main reasons we've seen people kind of lose faith in the game, get angry at the game, and overall I'd say public opinion of the game is a little bit less than what Ashes of Creation currently is holding. But there's been a lot of good reasons for that kind of disappointment, because they've actually had players play the game. They've actually received a lot of feedback. They've actually had people interact with the systems, taking that negative feedback and said, hey, we need more time to work on this. So there's a lot of positives that they've done in terms of development that could pay off. The other big thing that really kind of is both a benefit and also a shadow hanging over them is that it is, Amazon Game Studios that's making this game. It's a huge company. They have the resources. They've also had a whole bunch of flopped games. So you've got this really weird situation where Amazon really needs this game to work for a lot of different reasons, but they really need to actually have one of these games be a home run. And I think a lot of that has spurred the increased development time, the redesign of a lot of the direction that the game is taking, because originally it was much more of a survival game, and then it became kind of a survival meets MMO game. And more recently, as they've been working from the playtest to this, potential release, it's becoming more and more a theme park MMO. And when it does release, I suspect it will compete with games like Guild Wars 2 and The Elder Scrolls Online, which have much more of a focus on the world, the way players interact with the world through more of an action combat system. Not to say that that isn't achieved in Ashes or anything like that, but I'd say there's a lot more difference in the actual combat feel when you move from World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2 to New World versus going to Ashes of Creation. Though that's just what I've been able to see from videos for Ashes. I haven't played Ashes. I don't know if that's how the combat feels or what that is. But certainly from playing World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2 and actually having played the test version of New World, a lot of the systems do feel very different. You're actually trying to headshot with projectiles and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that you're not doing necessarily that you are doing in this game. And there are some negatives with this. A lot of the combat was very repetitive. A lot of the combat was very janky and not amazing feeling. You could kind of spam the same skill and just stun lock someone until they were dead. That being said, those things have been changed as well in the year from then. And there's been new skills added, because that was definitely something a lot of people noticed, is that there were a few very good skills. It seemed like everyone was running around with the same skills. One that comes to mind is that I think it was the life staff. It was kind of like a dash or teleport forward that was so powerful that pretty much every build, even if you were a tank, if you were a super stealthy like rogue or something like that, if you were a wizard, you were taking that dash because it was so handy to use just to traverse the land. And since then, we've seen that being removed. So it looks like New World is thinking about this stuff. They're thinking about, let's actually have some diversity. Let's have some player decisions that aren't just completely the same because they have to be. So they're considering all of this. I'd say New World promises less, and because of that might actually deliver more. It's a very different approach than what I'd say Ashes of Creation is taking. And I think because of that, people aren't quite as excited for New World. I think New World's going to end up being the sleeper that comes out providing some things that it does really well, and then if it keeps building on those things and adding a few additional things as it goes along, it could end up doing really well. My one big fear is that they still end up being in between genres, or not completely delivering on anything. And the best example I have for this is their recent introduction of their version of dungeons. I believe they're like expeditions or something like that. I apologize if I'm misnaming them, but they're instance dungeons that are completely going to be new to New World since the playtest. No one's, except for people who are in the alpha or beta or whatever, the closed testing that's going on right now are testing it, but I haven't seen them myself. So I'm only speculating on this, but I'm very interested to see how they play out, because the combat in New World doesn't exactly align with a Holy Trinity. And that's something that always gets messy when you try to mix action combat with Holy Trinity, because to pull off a lot of mechanics that we see in World of Warcraft and other bigger MMOs that have raids, that have dungeons, it relies on the idea of people having specific roles in the party. We have tanks that are supposed to do these very specific tank things. We have healers that are supposed to do these specific healer things, and we have DPS that have these specific DPS things to do. And the less of that Holy Trinity that's worked into the class system, the less that they're able to do these more engaging mechanics. And you end up having situations where it's pretty much a bunch of players that are just kind of kiting around this boss while they shoot at them and trying to stay alive, which is fun and can feel quite epic, especially if the combat itself is very fun, but it gets very repetitive if that's what every single fight ends up being. Now, there have been exceptions to this. We can look at, obviously, the Elder Scrolls Online and Guild Wars 2 that have light trinities where there is aggro mechanics and there is sort of healing classes. I mean, they're different from each other as well. We have more of a trinity in the Elder Scrolls Online and a bit less of a trinity in Guild Wars 2. But both of them have had their different issues with the way they handle combat as well. And I think ultimately the issue with it is that there's no perfect way that's been discovered to mix action combat with this style of gameplay. I think some people love the ways certain games have done things. I think certain people hate the way other games have done things. But there's no World of Warcraft where you can say World of Warcraft was king because they executed it perfectly and did it this way. That being said, you can look at WoW and say, it's gotten old. These systems have become boring. They've become stale. They haven't improved either. And it kind of runs into its own different issue. So I think that's one of the big systems that they're going to have to focus down, because not only does it apply to these expeditions or dungeons, it applies to open world bosses. It works its way into a lot of the different systems in the game. Now, this isn't obviously the only thing that's changed. They have some more theme park style stuff. They've introduced more traditional battleground feeling things, which I think is really good, since the current sort of war system they used to have wasn't super accessible for people. I didn't even get to play it, I don't think, during the beta or the playtest, despite trying very hard to get into it. They've added in-game voice acting for some of the quests, which is also good, because the quests sucked. That was some of the biggest feedback they got, was that the quests were kind of the same. You just had to pick a few things up. There was really no meaning to the entire world for doing the quests. And I think there's a lot of story they could tell, but they just weren't. Because that's another huge part of MMOs, is the story. is there a meaning for me to progress through this world? And it doesn't have to be a complete narrative, like a novel like you might get from Final Fantasy XIV. Because Final Fantasy XIV in a lot of ways lives and dies by its story, whereas a lot of other MMOs don't have as much emphasis. So the game really has to figure out where it's going to be for the story. But I certainly think having voice acting allows people to engage on a deeper level without putting much effort into it themselves. It's obviously a lot of effort from the developer side of things because they need to voice over all these quests, especially if they start going to different regions. It takes a lot of work to do that, but I think it does have a lot of payoff. We've seen it in games like The Elder Scrolls Online, where it does add a lot of meaning even just to exploring the world. And when it comes down to it, I think that's New World's biggest benefit right now, is that the world is really cool. The world, if you put your headphones on and you go into the forest in New World, you're actually kind of creeped out. It's spooky. You hear animals, you hear things creaking. There's a lot of ambience there that no other MMO has ever created. And I don't know if that comes from the fact that they built the world for a survival game and now they're using it for an MMO. I don't know if that level of detail was generated by starting with that different kind of idea. But whatever it is, it really does feel very unique. And I think that's going to be the selling point for a lot of people in New World, is just the idea of exploring and really feeling like you're in a world. And I think that's kind of the idea they have to capture and bring into all of the different combat and content that they're going to release. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the two games. I obviously don't know how this is going to turn out. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Are you more excited for Ashes of Creation? Are you more excited for New World? I think I will be playing both of them on this channel when they do come out. Obviously, I don't know if I'll stick around to do, endgame with them, depending on how I enjoy it. But I certainly think it's worth trying both of the games, because I think they are the two games that have a good shot of really making changes in the MMO market. And even if they don't become the top MMOs or anything like that, even if they just challenge some of the existing players to innovate, it'll be a win for all of us. But yeah guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.